The process of reporting on early childhood outcomes in Missouri began as a pilot program with 8 school districts in 2006 and has remained a federal reporting requirement for any school district providing early childhood special education services to children. This series of 7 modules is designed to give practitioners an understanding of the early childhood outcomes process. Each module is designed to be approximately 20 minutes long, making it possible to do one at a time or all of them in a half a day. Participants are encouraged to start and stop these modules at any time in order to have discussion with other participants or to make notes on something you have seen or heard. The companion documents mentioned throughout this series are available on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE's website on the Office of Special Education's page. Click on the Early Childhood Special Education tab and choose the Early Childhood Outcomes box. The objectives of this module series include providing districts with an understanding of why outcome data is collected, defining the 3 outcome areas, providing districts with an understanding of the differences between discrete skills and looking at those skills from the lens of functional abilities, identifying the 3 sources of information that should be used to collect ECHO information, providing districts with an understanding of the process for collecting information, determining a rating and reporting that rating, providing districts with an understanding of how to use their outcome data for program improvements. As mentioned in the first module, the ultimate goal of early intervention and early childhood special education is to enable young children to be active and successful participants during the early childhood years and in the future in a variety of settings. States are required to report outcome data for 3 global early childhood outcome areas. Module 2 will explore each of these outcome areas in depth. In this module, participants will understand how to define the outcome areas, the difference between isolated, discrete skills, and the use of those skills to perform functional, meaningful, everyday tasks, and how to look for the early childhood functional tasks that are involved in each of the 3 outcome areas. The 3 outcome areas can be described as global outcomes, reflecting the benefits that all children served by a program are expected to experience as a result of participating in that program. These global outcomes support the ultimate goal of ECSE, to enable young children to be active and successful participants during the early childhood years and in the future in a variety of settings, in their homes with their families, in child care, in preschool or school programs, and in the community. Measuring progress on the 3 global outcomes does not change the need for or the importance of individualized outcomes. Helping children achieve the functional, individualized outcomes outlined in their IEPs enables them to make progress in the 3 global outcomes and to achieve the ultimate goal of full participation. The child's individualized IEP goals should support progress in the 3 global outcomes. In this module, when we talk about outcomes, it is important to point out that the outcomes we are talking about are different from the goals that appear on an IEP. Global outcomes help us understand to what extent an ECSE program makes a difference for all children in the program and allows for a common way to measure those outcomes. It tells us about the benefits they experienced as a result of the services and supports provided to them. Measuring progress on global child outcomes does not replace developing and monitoring progress on individualized IEP goals. The Office of Special Education Programs require all state early intervention and preschool special education agencies to report data on 3 child outcomes. Children have positive social-emotional skills, including social relationships. Children acquire and use knowledge and skills, including early language, communication, and early literacy. Children use appropriate behaviors to meet their needs. In the next several slides, we will explore each of these areas in more depth. The first outcome focuses on children having positive social-emotional relationships. This means having good relationships with adults and playing well with other children. It also includes being able to separate from an adult when dropped off at childcare, expressing emotions and feelings appropriately, following rules and expectations in different settings, and sharing and taking turns. Children are expected to develop these and all skills on a continuum. We would not expect to see early 3-year-olds demonstrating the same behaviors in this area as a 5-year-old. This point is critical to keep in mind. We will get into more detail around using age-expected developmental norms when considering ratings for children in a later module. This graphic organizer depicts a wide variety of the functional tasks preschool-aged children would be expected to demonstrate at some point in their development. For example, within this outcome area, we would expect to see children begin to be able to transition between activities, respond to new situations and interactions in a way that might be different from how they respond to a familiar situation and interaction. Again, keeping in mind what is age appropriate. Take a minute to read through each of the areas depicted for Outcome 1. Each of the 3 outcome areas will have a graphic depiction like this. It might be helpful to make copies of these slides to hang in prominent places within classrooms as a reminder of what to look for when observing to determine progress for individual children in each of these areas. The second outcome area involves children acquiring and using knowledge and skills. This outcome area involves many skills that provide the foundation for later success in school, such as thinking, reasoning, remembering, problem solving, understanding symbols, and learning new words. This outcome area includes understanding the concepts of more and less and understanding the physical world, such as knowing that a ball will roll and ice will melt. The outcome will also include being able to repeat sounds, gestures and words, expressive language, and other communication skills, and for older children, early literacy and numeracy. There will be a difference in what we see early 3-year-olds doing versus what we should see 5-year-olds getting ready to go to kindergarten doing. It is up to us to understand the difference and make ratings that reflect what is age appropriate. Take a few minutes to review each of the areas shown for Outcome 2, the acquisition and use of knowledge and skills. Does your program utilize some type of age-normed checklist to monitor these types of skills through observation on a regular basis? Thinking about our Missouri Early Learning Standards, how do these tasks correspond with what we in Missouri expect preschoolers to know and be able to do prior to entering kindergarten? Do the individualized IEP goals we write focus on discrete skills that will lead to children being able to demonstrate these more functional tasks in all of the outcome areas? Understanding the skills and tasks involved in each of these outcome areas allows us to use our observation skills to truly make appropriate ratings for students when they enter and exit our ECSE programs. The third outcome area involves children taking appropriate action to meet their needs. Over the early childhood years, children become increasingly independent. This outcome includes taking care of basic needs like hand washing and going to the bathroom, getting from place to place, using tools like a fork or a toothbrush, and knowing not to run into the street. It also includes using motor skills to get something the child wants, such as pulling up a stool, using words or gestures to request more crackers, and other appropriate ways to get what the child needs or wants. Again, take a few minutes to review the areas shown for Outcome 3, the use of appropriate behaviors to meet needs. Pay particular attention to the words "with increasing independence" in 3 of the bullets. Many of the skills and tasks associated with this area are easier to pinpoint growth as we can physically see children making progress with those tasks. Also note that in the Communicating Needs box, There is no mention of words. Most children, as they develop, will begin to use words, phrases, and sentences to communicate these things. But just because children don't talk, it doesn't mean that they are not able to communicate their needs in an acceptable way. This is an area that we, as professionals who deal with children with disabilities, often confuse if we focus on talking as the only right way to communicate. The same thing needs to be considered under the bullet for moving around and using tools, manipulating things to meet needs. Children with physical impairments, whether gross or fine motor, can often very effectively move around or use tools to meet their needs. The questions we need to focus on: are they meeting their needs in an acceptable way, rather than how are they meeting their needs? The how may be unconventional, but if the goal is being accomplished and others are not negatively affected by it, we need to truly reflect on the ultimate goal for this outcome area. Once again, it might be worth considering making copies of these 3 slides as a reference for each classroom in your program, and potentially as references for families as well. This video from the Desired Results Access Project provides a brief yet effective glance at how each of these 3 outcome areas is important to child development from birth to 5 years old. Now that you've had a little bit of background in each of these 3 areas, pay particular attention to the wide variety of activities that we all have in our classroom settings for observing these outcome areas. Take note of the ways in which you might help parents and other caregivers think about these outcome areas in their settings, as they are an important part of this process as well. The 3 outcomes are broad. They reflect how the child functions throughout the day, at home, and wherever the child spends time. The outcomes cross developmental domains to capture how children integrate the skills and behaviors needed to participate in everyday activities. For example, we may observe a child who uses 3-word phrases to engage another child in play. This tells us how he integrates language with social functioning. Think about a child who can point to juice to indicate that she would like a drink. This tells us the child can point and shows that the child can point to communicate. Mapping assessment domains to each outcome can never capture the full extent of the outcome, although there are aspects of some assessment domains that are more closely connected to a particular outcome than others. For example, communication skills are needed for each of the outcomes. Similarly, motor skills cut across all the outcomes. They enable children to build with blocks with friends, pour water at the water table, and walk across the room to get a toy. It is also important to keep in mind that there are many different ways children demonstrate each outcome, and how a child demonstrates an outcome is different from children of different ages. A critical characteristic of the 3 child outcomes is that they are functional. Functional outcomes refer to the skills and behaviors that are meaningful to the child in the context of everyday living. Recommended practice for many years in early intervention and preschool special education has been to write functional outcomes on individualized family service plans, IFSPs, and individual education programs, IEPs. Non-functional outcomes are discrete behaviors taken out of context. Some assessment measures look at skills in isolation rather than context, such as how many rings a child can place on a stacking toy. Observing the child doing this may provide valuable information for a skilled clinician, but it is not a functional or meaningful outcome for a young child. Similarly, compare a young child smiling to a child smiling back at her mom in interactive social play. Smiling in the context of social interaction represents a meaningful, functional outcome. Note the focus on the child's ability to engage in activities that are meaningful to the child's daily life. The 3 child outcomes reflect this emphasis on functioning, which is consistent with recommended practice for identifying individualized outcomes. In order to determine whether or not children are able to use discrete skills to meet the functional tasks associated with each of the outcome areas in the context of everyday living, we have to be careful observers. First, we should ask ourselves if the child is accomplishing meaningful tasks in some way. Is the child able to participate in snack time with limited to no prompting and support? Does the child participate in center time in a meaningful way with limited to no prompting or support? Does he or she interact with peers in ways that promote getting along with others at an age-appropriate level? Does the child demonstrate these behaviors on a regular basis over time, or did we see it once or twice or in isolated situations? To know these things, we must be observing children in their natural activities and settings throughout the day. This will necessitate that we involve others who see and know the child, most especially parents or other caregivers, as well as those who interact with the child in our setting. As special educators, we are accustomed to focusing on individualized skill development through our IEP goals. To make decisions for ECHO ratings, we have to consider those skills and others in the context of everyday, meaningful activities for preschoolers. We need to know if a child who can say 10 words when prompted can actually use those words to communicate in a functional way. Can the child who has practiced holding a spoon actually use that spoon to feed himself without spilling food, assuming we are looking at a child who is developmentally supposed to be doing that at his or her age? As noted in the previous slide, we need to be observing children doing everyday things in everyday situations in order to determine whether or not they are meeting the expectations of the 3 outcome areas in ways that are close to or at the same as typically developing peers. As we saw in the video, some children will meet those expectations in unconventional ways, so we need to be keenly aware of the desired outcomes, not just how the child is getting to those outcomes. We have spent a good amount of time focusing on the types of functional tasks we would expect to see in each of the 3 outcome areas. Now it's time for a little practice. Either individually or with a partner or two, take a few minutes to look at each of the actions described in the first column and determine which of the 3 outcome areas that action might represent. You will have about 2 minutes for this activity. The X's represent the outcome area where most people felt that action fit. However, you may have determined the action fit better in a different area. Many actions, depending on context, could actually be covered in more than one outcome area. For example, the child who is pouring sand at the sand table may be doing so by taking turns or interacting in a positive way with a peer. That action may not only be representative of outcome area 2, acquiring and using knowledge and skills, but it may also represent having positive social emotional skills. It might be a worthwhile activity for your staff and your center to watch video snippets of preschool children doing a variety of activities using an outcome areas chart to see how consistently staff members view the same activities in regard to outcome areas. This could lead to great conversations about our knowledge of developmentally appropriate skills and how that plays into our expectations for the children in our programs. We have reached the end of Module 2. In summary, participants should have gained information on the following points. The 3 outcome areas refer to global functioning abilities of children rather than discrete skills. The 3 outcome areas are integrated across domains. The information about these outcome areas should be gathered over time during meaningful activities. There are many ways for children to demonstrate their functioning in each of these 3 areas. Based on the information provided in this module, answer these reflection questions with a partner, a small group, or if you're viewing this individually, take some notes on your thoughts. How would you explain the 3 outcome areas to a new teacher or to family members of students in your program? Why is it important to know the difference of discrete skills and functional meaningful outcomes? The resources listed on this slide were used in preparation of this module.